Hello, in this video we are going to be going over figurative language. This is also part of your academic language series, so this would go any notes that you take, or if you decide to print the PowerPoint, it will go in your academic language section of your reader's notebook. The PowerPoint, of course, will be posted right along with this video, so you can go through the slides and as slow or as quickly as you'd like, and you won't have audio to deal with as you go through. So help yourself to that. If you want to print that out and put it in your notebook, feel free. That would probably be a good idea. And for the modes of discourse and for the paraphrasing, I think all of that would be a great idea to put in your reader's notebook for future reference. So what is figurative language? So figurative language is using words to mean something other than they usually mean. So if you looked up a word in the dictionary, it has a definition, but you're using that word to mean something completely different than their definition in the dictionary. So it's used by authors to mean something completely different. And why would an author use words that mean something completely different than what their literal meaning is? Well, sometimes it's for comparison. Sometimes it's to make sure that the reader can create an image in their head. It's that comparing an image for the description, right? It's part of description. It's also to engage the reader, to make it interesting to read, so it's surprising. Or it also can enhance their writing style. It's really fun to think of figurative language once you get the hang of it. And it's also fun to read it once you get the hang of it. It's a little bit tricky if English is your second language because of that whole literal part. You're going to be looking things up and it's not going to mean that. So this is a hard thing if this is your second or third language that you're learning. All right, so there are different types of figurative language, and we're going to go through each type, but this is a nice slide that kind of summarizes them all on one slide in case you want to have it all on one slide. And then there's a nice example over here as well. So we're going to go over all of these types. And the first type that we're going to talk about is alliteration. Alliteration is the beginning sound of the word. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the same letter, because sometimes like C can sound the same as S, or it can sound the same as K. So maybe there would be a word that started with C along with a bunch of K words. It's the sound at the beginning that's the important thing. So the chapter 1 from The Lost City and the Monkey God, here has how Preston uses alliteration. From the air it looked like a sun-dappled tropical paradise, not the dangerous, dank, disease and snake-infested jungle Woody was picturing. So you can see that I've highlighted the D's here, dangerous, dank, and disease. So why did Preston use this? Was it for emphasis? Was it to create a mood or impression? Or was it to be clever and fun? Those are usually the reasons why people use alliteration. What do you think the reason is that Preston used this? Alliteration, dangerous, dank, disease, and snake-infested jungle. Just think about it. All right, so that's alliteration. And once you start noticing alliteration, it's alarmingly addictive. Anyway, the next one is assonance. Assonance is when the vowel sounds in the neighboring words are creating an effect for emphasis, again, for a mood or impression, or to be clever and fun. Same reasons as alliteration. So here is from The Lost City and the Monkey God. This is chapter 14. My flashlight's feeble beam was fading. Feeble beam. So again, you can think about, I wonder why. Why was he using assonance here? Okay, and our next one is hyperbole. Hyperbole is something that I love and I speak in all the time. So does my son. My son is a hyperbole addict. We always just have to, he says there's 500 of something and we know that there's 2. So hyperbole is when you exaggerate for an effect. Sometimes it's to be funny. Sometimes it's to show sarcasm. It definitely creates a mood or tone, or it could be to make the audience or reader in for a true meaning as well. So I tend to speak in hyperbole a lot as well. That's probably where my son learned it, mostly to either be sarcastic or funny. But here's chapter 10 of Preston's book, and he says, "I would never go back up that river. It's the most dangerous place on the planet, that river." So this was Bruce Heinecke, right? And he was exaggerating about Rio Patuco. Whatever, the river that he was in. Remember the one where the jaguar leaped out at him? So, again, why would he exaggerate? Why did he choose to do that? Okay, the next one is my favorite. This is idiom. I love idioms. Idioms are my favorite, and these are the hardest to understand, because if you don't know the idiom, there's no way to figure it out. But I love them. I speak an idiom all the time, and that's a hyperbole all the time, right? So this is an expression that doesn't make any literal sense at all, but it could be in the dictionary as a phrase, because they are the phrases that are used over and over again to create their own meaning. So it's to add variety to your sentences, and it just adds a lot of character. So Preston in chapter 17 says, "Enough people knew the location of T1, Steve said, that the cat was out of the bag." So I actually have used this, right? Don't let the cat out of the bag. What does he mean by that? Have you heard that expression? Don't let the cat out of the bag. It just means that, you don't want to let on the secret. It's a secret. So if you don't let the cat out of the bag, that means you're keeping a secret. But if you do let the cat out of the bag, that means you told the secret. In our house, we say, "Loose lips sink ships." But here, it's "let the cat out of the bag." There's a whole bunch of idioms. When pigs fly, and I'm not going to remember them all, but we'll talk again on Monday about that, because I love idioms. They're my favorite. The next one is one that you've probably heard about and studied before. It's the metaphor. It's a direct comparison, and you're comparing two unlike things. And you're going to create an image when you do this. So here is the example from Preston's book. "The route took us over the Patuca River, Heinecke's most dangerous place on the planet, a brown snake of water winding through the jungle." So he's to create an image, to reference something known. Why else would he use a brown snake in this situation? Think about that. Is there another reason why he'd use that image particularly? Think about that. We'll talk about it on Monday. All right, here's another one, onomatopoeia. This is super fun. I loved onomatopoeia. I love figurative language. It's so much fun. So this is a word that has a sound effect. So bang would be an onomatopoeia, right? And so here is Preston's chapter 14 again. "Flocks of egrets flew below, white dots drifting against the green, and the treetops thrashed with the movements of unseen monkeys. As had been true in 2012, there was no sign of human life, not a road, trail, or wisp of smoke." Right? You can hear that, right? You can hear the thrashing, and you can hear wisp. So onomatopoeia. Bang, boom, right? Onomatopoeia. Okay, so here's the next one, personification. Personification is giving human-like qualities to something that's not human at all. So it's to personalize something, it's to give it human-like power, and it's just to make something inanimate alive. So here is a perfect example of personification. "I was struck by the valley's picturesque topography, the ring of mountains embracing a gentle, rolling landscape divided by two rivers." We know that mountains cannot give anybody a hug, but in this instance, we can see how the mountains kind of are around that gentle, rolling landscape, and you can see how it would be looking like it would be embracing it. So that is why he decided to use personification. Only people hug. But in this case, he wanted the mountains. He wanted you to visualize and experience the mountains embracing. So we do this a lot too. For example, I have said, like, I hurt my toe and I said, my toe is angry. Toes can't be angry. So I was personifying my toe, even though it's a part of a person, right? So personification gives human-like qualities to something that's not human. Similes are very similar to metaphors, except they're indirect comparison. They're going to use the words like or as to compare two unlike things. So here's an example from chapter 11. The tree crowns were packed together like puffballs. So you can see the word like is right there. And so like or as makes it an indirect comparison. This is very similar to metaphors. The only difference really is that it's indirect instead of direct. Okay, and one more, allusion. Allusion is hard. Allusion is a literary reference. So what they're going to do is they're going to use something that is in a different story, a story that's well known, maybe a folk tale, or maybe the Bible, or another religious text. That it is assumed that all the readers, all the audience knows that story, and they're going to use something from that story. They're not going to name the story. They're just going to use a scene or a phrase from that story in order to allude to it. That's why it's called an allusion, right? And so in chapter 14, Preston says, "Following the slashed leaves and vines like breadcrumbs, I retraced the trail to the center of camp." He was lost at this time, right? And so he was following the vines like breadcrumbs. This is an allusion, a literary reference to a fairy tale. And there's a picture here of the fairy tale. And so I'm going to ask you on Monday, who knows which fairy tale this is that he's alluding to when they're following the breadcrumbs to get back to being lost. So that is all of the figurative language. We're going to do some practicing with this on Monday as well. And Douglas Preston does such a great job of using figurative language in this book. I want you to start paying attention to when he uses figurative language, so you can start pulling those examples. And please use those examples in your word collections. And then you can explain why you're pulling those words or those phrases because of the figurative language. So that can be definitely part of your word collection. Okay, the last thing I have to do is homework. So here's what you're going to do, and I'm going to post everything on D2L. Everything's in content already, but I will be posting it to the announcement Snow Days class. What you're going to do is you're going to read and annotate for purpose the article Dying for Discovery. I have that posted in content. I will post it for you. I would like you to print and read To Kill a Hawk. That's another essay. Print and read it for Monday. You're also going to print and read Being Prey, Surviving a Crocodile Attack. That will also be posted in content. And then on Monday, please come to class with your reader's notebook all the way organized as you can make it. So I can check on that so you will be prepared for your reader's notebook conference. On Monday, I will be asking you all of the questions. And I will also, I'll be posting, after I'm done with this, I'm going to create an assignment folder for your LiDAR stuff. So upload your LiDAR definition and definition paraphrase and your paraphrase of the steps. Okay? And then bring all of your articles and stuff on Monday, and I will be asking you all the questions I've warned you about. And I will see you on Monday. Stay safe and warm, and I hope you've had a fun snow day.